Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Take a moment to get comfortable wherever you are. Let your shoulders relax and let the day gently fall away. You don't need to do anything right now. Just listen and let the story unfold at its own pace. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin.
The night of Solomon Prime, the age of ash and the forgotten covenant. Long before songs were written in ink, before kings learned to crown themselves with gold instead of wisdom, there existed an age the elders would later name the Age of Ash. It was not called so because of fire alone, but because memory itself had begun to crumble, turning slowly, quietly into dust. Yet on the night our story begins, the world was peaceful. Snow rested gently on the tiled roofs of Eldermere, a small medieval town folded into the arms of pine forests and silver hills. Lanterns glowed like captured stars along stone-paved streets, their light soft and honey-warm. Smoke rose lazily from chimneys, carrying the scent of bread, herbs, and pinewood into the sky. Bells chimed the 9th hour, not sharp but round and comforting, as if even time itself wished to tread softly. Inside the town walls, life moved at the pace of contentment. And children laughed beneath wool cloaks too large for them. Old men leaned on canes carved with symbols no one remembered carving. Women hummed lullabies older than their grandmothers while stirring stews thick with root vegetables and slow-cooked joy. The world, at least here, felt safe. But safety, like warmth, is often most precious just before it fades. The forgotten covenant. High above Eldermere, beyond the watchtower and the frost-kissed banners, stood the monastery of quiet stone. Built centuries earlier from pale granite, it looked less like a fortress and more like a prayer made solid. Snow never seemed to cling to its walls for long, as if the stone itself breathed warmth. Within its deepest chamber sat Brother Aldrich, the oldest living keeper of stories. His beard was long and white, flowing like a river frozen mid-motion. His hands trembled, not from weakness, but from age heavy with remembrance. Before him lay a table of oak darkened by centuries of candle smoke. Upon it rested a single book bound in cracked leather, and sealed with a sigil so worn it looked more like a shadow than a symbol. Aldrich had not opened this book in 40 years. Tonight, however, the air felt different. The candles flickered without wind. The stone walls hummed faintly, like a distant choir holding a single note. Aldrich closed his eyes and whispered words taught only to those sworn to silence. The covenant stirs. He opened the book. Its pages were not yellowed with age. They were ash gray, warm to the touch, as if once burned and reborn. Written upon them was the story of a promise made in an age when kings still knelt before wisdom, when the world nearly broke. The covenant had been forged at the end of a terrible war, one that had threatened not kingdoms, but existence itself. In those days, the world had cracked along unseen lines. Shadows moved without owners. Time stumbled. And something ancient, something vast and hungry for order, pressed against the fabric of reality like a hand against glass. To prevent the unraveling, King Solomon the Wise, whose name would later fracture into myth, gathered scholars, mystics, knights, and builders. Together, they created Solomon Prime, not a place, not a weapon, but a principle, a balance between power and restraint, knowledge bound by humility. And to guard that balance, a covenant was sworn. No single ruler would command Solomon Prime. No single mind would hold all its truths. And should the covenant ever weaken, a knight would rise not by birth but by calling. The covenant was sealed, the fractures healed, and the world slowly learned to breathe again. But as centuries passed, gratitude turned into complacency. Stories became bedtime tales, then footnotes, then nothing at all, until tonight. The town wrapped in warmth. Back in Eldermere, the town prepared for night rest, a winter tradition where families stayed awake a little longer, sharing stories and sweetened wine before sleep. It was said that on night rest, the world listened more closely to human hearts. In a modest stone house near the eastern wall lived a boy named Irian. He was 15 winters old, with dark hair that refused to lie flat and eyes the color of old bronze. He sat cross-legged near the hearth, carving a small wooden horse while his mother hummed softly. His father, a town blacksmith, dozed in his chair, hands still strong even in sleep. Irian liked nights like this. The fire crackled kindly. The world felt close and safe. Yet somewhere deep within him, a quiet restlessness stirred, like a word on the tip of the tongue. "Mother," he asked softly, "do you believe old stories ever wake up?" She smiled, brushing his hair aside. "Stories never sleep, my heart, people do." Irian nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling comforted all the same. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow, deliberate, peaceful, ash beneath the snow. As the town settled into contentment, something unseen shifted far beyond Eldermere's hills. Deep beneath forgotten ruins, where no lantern had shone for centuries, ancient mechanisms stirred. Stone rings turned for the first time in generations. Symbols long buried beneath ash pulsed faintly, like embers remembering fire. And above it all, the stars rearranged themselves just slightly. Not enough to alarm kings, not enough to wake armies, but enough to awaken a covenant, the keeper's choice. Back in the monastery, Brother Aldrich closed the book with trembling care. Tears lined his eyes, not from fear, but from awe. "The cycle returns," he murmured, and this time gently. He walked to the window overlooking Eldermere. From here, the town looked like a nest of warmth cradled by darkness. Lanterns glowed, fires burned, lives continued. Aldrich smiled. "It always begins like this," he said softly, "with peace." He reached into his robe and withdrew a small object, a ring of dull silver, engraved with a star so faint it almost vanished in the light. The seal of Prime. It had grown warm. The covenant did not roar. It did not demand. It invited. It's a calm night, a gentle promise. As night-rest drew to a close, Eldermere slept under a sky heavy with stars. Dreams settled like blankets over tired minds. The world, for now, remained kind. Irian lay awake just a moment longer than usual. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, not fear, not excitement, but a sense of belonging to something unnamed. He smiled, turned on his side, and slept. The fire dimmed. The snow fell softly. The age of ash, long thought ended, whispered its first reminder, not in flame or sorrow, but in quiet hope. And somewhere, written not in ink but in fate itself, a promise waited patiently to be remembered, when the Star of Solomon fell from the sky. The night after Nightrust passed without storm or omen, and that itself felt like a blessing. Morning came to Eldermere gently, as it always did. Snow still lay upon the roofs, soft and unbroken, catching the pale gold of sunrise. The bells rang the first hour, slow and patient, calling bakers to ovens and shepherds to gates. Smoke rose again, carrying warmth into the winter air. No one in the town knew that the sky had already made a decision, a sky that remembered. High above the waking world, where clouds thinned into pale veils and the air grew sharp and silent, the stars lingered longer than usual. One among them shimmered, not brighter, but deeper, as though it held layers within layers of light. This star had a name once. In the old tongue, it was called Solomon's Witness. It was not born of fire alone. It was shaped by vow, by balance, by the final breath of an age that had nearly torn itself apart. For centuries, it had remained fixed, watching, waiting, marking the slow turn of time. Now the covenant had stirred it awake. The star trembled. Then, with a soundless grace, it began to fall. Morning in Eldermere Irian woke to the smell of bread. His mother had been up before dawn, as usual, kneading dough with steady hands and a soft tune on her lips. Sunlight slipped through the shutters in narrow golden lines, catching dust motes that drifted lazily in the air. "You're late," she said kindly, without looking back. Irian stretched and laughed. The fire was too warm. His father grunted in agreement from the corner, already halfway through his breakfast. Outside, the hammer of the forge rang out, familiar, grounding safe. Irian stepped into the cold, breath fogging before him, cloak pulled tight. The world felt peaceful. Too peaceful, perhaps, but he had no words for that feeling yet. As he crossed the square, old Merrick, the story-keeper, waved him over. "You look like someone who dreamed hard," Merrick said, eyes twinkling beneath his hood. "Did I?" Irian asked. Merrick nodded. "The world tends to whisper to those who listen in their sleep." Irian smiled politely, unsure what to say, and continued on his way. Above them, unnoticed, the sky held its breath. The fall it happened just past midday, not with thunder, not with terror, but with beauty. The sky brightened suddenly, as though a second sun had opened its eye. People stopped where they stood, bakers, guards, children mid-laughter, and looked upward. A streak of light traced a slow arc across the heavens, glowing silver gold, shedding sparks like falling petals. It did not burn the sky, it caressed it. Someone whispered, a blessing. Someone else crossed themselves. Irian felt his heart thud, not with fear, but with recognition. The star fell beyond the hills, into the ancient woodlands where no paths remained. As it vanished, the light faded gently, leaving the sky unchanged, as if nothing had happened at all. Then the world exhaled. Birds resumed their calls. Conversations returned in hushed excitement. And children laughed again, pretending to chase the falling light through the snow. It was beautiful, Irian breathed. But Brother Aldrich, watching from the monastery window, closed his eyes. "It has begun," he said softly. The warm woods by late afternoon, curiosity had grown warm and bold. Small groups gathered at the edge of Eldermere, debating whether the light had been a star, an omen, or a trick of winter skies. Most decided it was safest to stay home. Fires were warm. The world was uncertain. Irian, however, felt a gentle pull, not strong, not urgent, but constant. He packed bread, wrapped himself well, and slipped into the woods just as dusk began to paint the snow in shades of blue and rose. The forest welcomed him. Tall pines stood like ancient guardians, their branches heavy with snow. The air smelled of resin and frost. Each step crunched softly, rhythm steady, comforting. Lantern light from town faded behind him, replaced by moonlight and quiet. Irian did not feel alone. Where the star rested, he found the clearing as night settled fully. The snow there had melted, not burned, but warmed away, revealing dark earth beneath. At its center lay a shallow stone hollow, ancient and circular, its carvings worn smooth by time. Hovering just above it was the star. It was smaller now, no larger than an apple, glowing softly, pulsing like a living heart. Its light was warm, not blinding, peaceful. Irian approached slowly. As he reached out, the star drifted closer, as if recognizing him. When it touched his palm, there was no pain, only warmth, a feeling of being known. Images flickered through his mind, not visions, but impressions. Stone halls, quiet vows, a balance held with care. The tears welled in his eyes, though he did not know why. "I don't understand," he whispered. The star dimmed slightly, as if smiling. Then it sank gently into the hollow, becoming still. The clearing fell silent again, the covenant's echo. When Irian returned to Eldermere, the town was already glowing with evening fires. Lanterns lit the streets. The smell of stew and roasted grain filled the air. No one noticed the faint silver mark now resting just beneath his skin, over his heart, a star so subtle it could only be seen in certain light. Brother Aldrich did. He waited at the edge of the forest, staff in hand, smile soft and knowing. "You found it," he said. Irian swallowed. "It found me." Aldrich nodded. "That is how it always works." They walked back toward the monastery together, snow crunching beneath their boots, the night calm and full of promise. Above them, the stars returned to their quiet watching. Solomon's witness had fallen, but not to end the world, to begin it again. A joyful night. That night, Eldermere slept peacefully. Fires burned low. Bells fell silent. Dreams came gentle and bright. Irian lay awake only long enough to feel the steady warmth in his chest, then drifted into sleep with a smile. The covenant had spoken, not in fear, but in kindness, and the story moved forward. the boy who bore the prime mark. The morning after the star's fall arrived without spectacle, and that, in Eldermere, was considered a blessing. Snow still blanketed the streets, but it had softened overnight, turning the town into a quilt of white stitched with stone and smoke. The bells rang the second hour, their sound mellow and round, echoing gently off the walls and into the surrounding hills. It was the kind of morning that invited slow steps, warm hands around mugs, and long pauses by the fire. Urian woke with the strange certainty that something within him had shifted, like furniture rearranged in the dark. Nothing hurt, nothing felt wrong, yet nothing felt quite the same. He sat up in bed and pressed a hand to his chest, warm, not feverish, not sharp. Just warm, steady, reassuring, like embers long banked but never extinguished. For a moment, he simply breathed, a mark seen only by light later that morning, as sunlight poured through the shutters and caught the thin mist of warmth rising from the hearth. Irian noticed something curious. When the light struck his skin at just the right angle, a faint symbol appeared, barely there, like breath on glass. A star, not sharp-edged, not bright, but softly geometric, ancient in its symmetry. He turned slightly. It vanished. He turned back. It returned. His heart skipped, not with fear, but with wonder. "It's real," he whispered. There was no pain in it, no sense of danger. It felt like a promise that had been waiting patiently to be kept. Footsteps sounded outside the door. Irian, his mother, called. "Breakfast will go cold." He pulled his tunic on quickly, the symbol disappearing beneath the wool, and stepped into the warmth of the room. His father looked up from the table, eyes kind and steady. "You sleep well?" his father asked. Irian nodded. "Very." It was true. Whispers in the town. By midday, word of the falling star had fully settled into Eldermere's collective memory, not as alarm, but as wonder. Some said it meant a good harvest. Others claimed it was a blessing from saints whose names had been forgotten. Merrick, the storykeeper, insisted it was an old friend returning home. "Stars don't fall," a baker scoffed. "They visit." Children reenacted the moment in the snow, arms outstretched, voices hushed with awe. Irian passed among them quietly, feeling the warmth beneath his tunic respond, not stronger, but more present. As if listening, Brother Aldrich watched from the monastery steps. He saw the way Irian moved, not like a chosen one, not like a hero, but like a boy whose steps now fell in subtle harmony with the world around him. Aldrich smiled. The covenant never rushed. The quiet invitation that afternoon, Aldrich sent a simple message to Irian's family. No summons, no urgency, just an invitation for tea. Irian followed the familiar path to the monastery as evening crept in, snow glowing faintly blue beneath the rising moon. The doors opened without a sound, warmth spilling out to greet him. Inside, candles burned low, casting gentle halos of light across stone walls carved with patterns older than language. Aldrich poured tea with slow care. "Do you know what a mark is, Irian?" he asked gently. Irian considered. "A sign, yes," Aldrich said, but also a memory. He gestured for Irian to sit. The prime mark does not announce itself loudly. It doesn't demand obedience. It simply reminds. Reminds me of what? Irian asked. Aldrich smiled. That the world is balanced not by strength, but by care. The warmth in Irian's chest pulsed once like agreement. Stories by candlelight that night. Aldrich told stories, not lectures, not warnings, just stories shared the way bread is broken and passed. He spoke of an age when knowledge and kindness were braided together, of knights who laid down swords to listen, of builders who carved wisdom into stone so it could not be shouted away. Irian listened, wrapped in a blanket, tea warming his hands, the world outside hushed and peaceful. You are not chosen to fight, Aldrich said quietly. Not yet, perhaps not ever. Irian looked up, surprised. You are chosen to remember, Aldrich continued. And remembering is the hardest thing of all. The boy nodded slowly. It felt right. A test without pain before Irian left. Aldrich led him to a small chamber beneath the monastery. At its center stood a stone basin filled with clear water. Candles circled it like stars around a moon. Place your hand in, Aldrich said. Irian did. The water warmed instantly, not hot, but comforting, like a bath drawn by someone who loved you. The prime mark glowed faintly beneath his tunic. Aldrich bowed his head. The Covenant recognizes you, he said softly. No thunder followed, no walls shook, the water stilled. That was all. The boy returns home. Irian walked home beneath a sky heavy with stars, heart light, steps sure. His mother had left a bowl of stew warming by the fire. His father had polished tools laid neatly by the door. Life continued, and that, Irian realized, was the greatest gift of all. He sat by the hearth, warmth seeping into his bones, and felt the prime mark settle, not as a burden, but as a quiet companion. Outside, snow fell again, soft and unhurried. A happy night, gently kept as Eldermere slept. Brother Aldrich returned the seal of Prime to its resting place. The boy is kind, he murmured to the stone walls. That is enough for now. Far above, the stars watched in silence. The Covenant had found its bearer, not a warrior yet, not a legend, but a boy who knew warmth, listened well, and loved peace. And so the night ended not with fear, but with contentment. The fire burned low. The world rested easy. And the story continued, patiently, kindly, one chapter at a time. The order that guards what should not exist. Winter had reached its deepest breath. In Eldermere, this was the time when the world seemed to pause between heartbeats. Snow lay thick and unbroken beyond the town walls, smoothing the land into gentle curves and soft silence. The sky often wore a pale gray veil, and even the sun appeared reluctant to linger, offering only a few shy hours of light before retreating again. Yet inside the town, warmth reigned. Fires were never allowed to fade completely. Bread ovens worked longer hours. Neighbors knocked without reason, bringing stories, cheese, or simply the comfort of company. It was said in Eldermere that winter revealed who truly belonged to one another. Irian belonged here. And yet, as the days passed, he began to feel the edges of the world stretching, slowly, respectfully, asking him to notice more. The first sign of the order, it began with footsteps where no one stood. One quiet evening, just after dusk, Irian sat by the monastery's outer wall, carving small runes into a block of spare wood, not symbols of magic, but shapes he remembered from the temple of silent stone. His hands moved without effort, guided by memory rather than thought. The prime mark lay warm against his chest. Then he heard it, a step, measured, unhurried, heavy with purpose. Irian looked up. At the edge of the courtyard stood 3 figures, cloaked in gray so deep it nearly matched the stone itself. Snow rested on their shoulders, unmelted, as if the cold itself respected them. They did not look threatening, they looked certain. Brother Aldrich emerged moments later, as though he had been expecting them all along. So, Aldrich said gently, inclining his head, "You have come." As those who guard the unnameable, the tallest of the 3 stepped forward. His hood fell back, revealing a weathered face lined not with cruelty, but with responsibility. His beard was streaked with iron gray, his eyes calm as still water. "We follow the stirring," he said. "Nothing more." Aldrich nodded. "Then you have followed it correctly." Irian rose slowly, heart steady. The man turned to him, not appraising, not judging, but recognizing. "You carry warmth that does not belong to this age alone," the man said. "You are the marked one." Irian swallowed. "I didn't ask for it." A faint smile touched the man's lips. "None of us ever do." The order revealed they descended together, again into the temple of silent stone, but this time the chamber felt different, not changed, awakened. The gray-cloaked figures removed their outer garments, revealing armor beneath, not bright, not polished, but worn smooth by time and care. Each bore a subtle emblem upon the breast, a broken circle enclosing a star. "The Order of the Veiled Prime," Aldrich said softly. Irian's breath caught. "The Covenant's last keepers," Aldrich continued. "Not rulers, not warriors in the common sense, witnesses, guardians." The leader inclined his head. "We guard what should not exist," he said, "because the world is not ready to remember it all at once. A history spoken quietly." They sat upon stone benches warmed by hidden channels beneath the floor. Candles were lit, not to illuminate, but to honor the telling. Long ago, after Solomon Prime was established, the world was healed, but not whole. There were truths too heavy to rest openly upon human minds. So the order was formed. They did not command Solomon Prime, they shielded it. When kingdoms rose, they stepped aside. When empires fell, they watched. When knowledge grew dangerous, they buried it beneath patience. "We were never many," the leader said, "and we were never meant to be remembered." Irian listened, wrapped in silence, the prime mark pulsing gently with each truth spoken. "Why the order has returned at the end of each age," the leader continued. "A bearer arises, not to wield power, but to decide how much of it should be remembered." Irian felt the weight of that, not crushing, but solemn. "I'm not ready," he said honestly. The second figure, a woman with silver-threaded hair and kind eyes, spoke for the first time. Readiness is not a requirement, she said softly. Willingness is. Aldrich placed a hand on Irian's shoulder. You are not being taken, he said. You are being invited. A test of kindness before the order would leave. They asked for no oath, no vow. Only this, they brought forward a small wooden box. Inside lay fragments of ancient stone, cracked and worn. These were once part of a gate, the leader explained. It could open paths the world was not ready to walk. What should be done with them? Irian asked. The leader met his eyes. Tell us. Irian studied the fragments. They shouldn't be destroyed, he said slowly. But they shouldn't be used either. The woman smiled. Then, return them to rest, Irian said. Let them be remembered without being touched. The order bowed, a promise without words. That night, the order remained in Eldermere, not as guests, but as shadows woven gently into the town's rhythm. They helped mend fences, shared bread, listened more than they spoke. No one felt threatened. Children felt safe near them. That, Aldrich noted, mattered greatly. Before dawn, they gathered once more at the monastery gate. The road will open soon, the leader told Irian. Not away from home, but through it. Irian nodded, heart calm. I'll be here, he said. The leader smiled. Exactly. A warm ending, carefully kept. As the order departed into the snowy hills, the town of Eldermere remained unchanged to the casual eye. Fires burned, bells rang, life continued. But beneath the stone, beneath the snow, beneath the quiet routines, something ancient rested easier. The covenant was guarded, the bearer was kind. The night was warm, and somewhere deep within the world, Solomon Prime waited, not to rise, but to be remembered correctly. Trials of steel, blood, and ancient wisdom. Winter did not loosen its grip quickly. In Eldermere, the snow lingered well past the point when impatience usually set in. Roofs wore white crowns. Trees stood wrapped in silence. Even the river beyond the eastern fields moved slowly beneath its skin of ice, murmuring like a dreamer reluctant to wake. To Irian, it felt right. Some lessons, Brother Aldrich often said, could only be learned when the world itself slowed enough to listen. The quiet beginning of trial, the order of the Veiled Prime, did not announce the start of Irian's trials. There were no horns, no gathering crowds, no words like test or initiation. Instead, one gray morning, Aldrich handed Irian a bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside lay a simple sword. Its blade was unadorned steel, neither bright nor dull, bearing no runes or gemstones. The hilt was wrapped in worn leather, shaped to fit the hand comfortably rather than impressively. It's old, Irian said. Yes, Aldrich replied, and honest. Irian lifted it. The balance surprised him, not heavy, not light, but true. This sword has never taken a life, Aldrich continued, but it has protected many. Irian looked up. Is this the first trial? Aldrich smiled faintly. No. This is the permission to begin. Steel without violence, they trained in the monastery's lower courtyard. where stone walls blocked the wind and snow fell softly like drifting ash. The order did not teach Irian to strike first. They taught him to stand, feet placed with intention. Breath drawn without haste, eyes open, not narrowed. The woman with silver-threaded hair, whose name was Malin, guided him patiently. A sword is not an extension of anger, she said. It is an extension of awareness. They practiced movements slow enough to feel foolish at first, cuts traced through empty air. Parries imagined against invisible opponents. Irian learned to listen to the weight of the blade. Some days his arms ached, some days his thoughts wandered, and some days the prime mark pulsed gently, as if reminding him to return to the moment. No one scolded him. That, he learned, was part of the trial. Blood without battle, the second trial came unexpectedly. One evening, as snow felt heavy and wet, a shout echoed through Eldermere's streets. A child had fallen through the ice near the river. Irian was closest. He ran without thinking, boots slipping on stone, breath burning his lungs. When he reached the riverbank, panic ruled the scene, voices shouting, hands reaching, fear thick as smoke. The ice groaned beneath the boy's weight. Irian did not draw his sword. He lay flat, spreading his weight, inching forward as Aldrich's voice echoed in his memory, balance before bravery. When the ice cracked further, Irian reached out not with strength but with calm. The boy's mitten slipped free. His hand found Irian's wrist. The prime mark flared, not hot but steady. And together they slid back onto solid ground. Blood stained the snow, Irian's hand torn by ice, the boy's knee scraped raw, but both were alive. Malin arrived moments later, kneeling beside Irian, binding his hand. "This," she said softly, "is the blood the Covenant recognizes." Irian trembled not from cold, but from relief. Ancient wisdom, earned slowly, the third trial was the longest. Each evening, Irian descended into the temple of silent stone alone. No candles were lit, no voices guided him. He sat before the silent stone and listened. At first, he heard nothing. Then memories surfaced, not his own, but impressions left behind. Fear once felt and survived, pride once broken and mended, love offered without expectation. The prime mark did not show him answers. It taught him patience. Days passed, then weeks. Winter began finally to loosen, the trial unnamed. On the final night, Aldrich joined him. "You have one more trial," the old keeper said. "It has no form." Irian looked confused. "What do I do?" Aldrich placed the sword gently on the stone floor. "You decide who you are when no one is watching." They left him alone. Irian sat in silence for a long time. Then he removed the sword and laid it beside the stone, not in offering, not in rejection, but in trust. "I don't want to be feared," he said softly to the dark. "I want to be useful." The stone warmed. That was the answer. Recognition, not reward at dawn. The order gathered. No kneeling. No ceremony. Malin placed a simple leather band around Irian's wrist, embossed faintly with the broken circle and star. "You have completed the trials," she said. Irian frowned. "It doesn't feel finished." She smiled. Good. Aldrich laughed quietly. The best trials never end, he said. They simply become who we are. A night of joy that evening, Eldermere celebrated nothing in particular and everything at once. A potluck feast filled the square. Music drifted through lantern-lit streets. Laughter rang bright and honest. Irian sat by the fire, sword resting beside him, band warm against his wrist, prime mark steady in his chest. He felt tired. He felt whole. Above, the stars shone calmly, unchanged, patient, approving. A gentle ending. As the night deepened, Malin stood beside Aldrich at the monastery steps. "He is ready," she said. Aldrich shook his head, smiling. "No, but he is becoming, and that is better." Snow melted softly around the town, feeding roots beneath the earth. Spring would come. And with it, the next turning of the story. The betrayal written in sacred ink. Spring did not arrive in Eldermere all at once. It came the way trust does, carefully, in small gestures. Snow withdrew from the southern slopes first. Water began to sing beneath the ice. Moss returned to the stones near the monastery, softening edges shaped by long years of weather and prayer. The town welcomed the change gently. Windows opened wider. Bread dough rose faster. Children ran without slipping. Eldermere felt like a place remembering how to exhale. Irian felt it too. Yet beneath the warmth, something in him remained watchful, not tense but attentive. Like a hand resting near a door, ready to open it if needed. The prime mark had grown quiet again. That, Aldrich knew, was never coincidence. The messenger who knew the old words he arrived at dusk. No banner announced him. No horse waited outside the gates. He walked into Eldermere as though he had always known the way, boots clean, cloak dark green, eyes sharp but polite. He introduced himself simply. "My name is Corvin," he said to the gate guard. "I carry ink meant for old stone." That phrase, "ink meant for old stone," was not spoken lightly. It was a phrase last used generations ago. Within the hour, Brother Aldrich was standing face to face with the stranger in the monastery's outer hall. Corvin bowed deeply. "The Order of the Veiled Prime sends greeting," he said. Aldrich did not return the bow. "Which branch?" Aldrich asked quietly. Corvin smiled, smooth and practiced. "The Western Archives." Aldrich felt the stone beneath his feet grow colder. Sacred ink. Corvin carried a leather case bound with brass clasps etched in covenant script. When opened, it revealed parchment of rare make, treated with ash salt and silver resin, designed to last centuries. Upon it was written a declaration. A correction, Corvin called it. An amendment to the Covenant's custodianship, Corvin explained, voice calm, respectful. The world changes. Even balance must adapt. Aldrich read the text slowly. Each word was carefully chosen, beautifully written, dangerous. The document proposed centralizing the Covenant's knowledge, bringing scattered fragments together under a single council, for efficiency, for protection. For control. This contradicts Solomon Prime itself, Aldrich said quietly. Corvin inclined his head. It refines it. Irian reads the ink. Irian was invited, not summoned, to attend the reading. As his eyes traced the lines, the prime mark warmed, not painfully, but uneasily. "This doesn't feel wrong," Irian said slowly. "But it doesn't feel right either." Corvin smiled. "That is the discomfort of progress." Malin stood rigid beside the pillar, hands clasped behind her back. "Progress that silences choice," she said, "is not progress." Corvin met her gaze calmly. "The world is fragile," he said. "Someone must hold it firmly." The first fracture that night, Aldrich descended alone into the temple of silent stone. He placed the document upon the floor before the pillar. The stone did not warm. It remained still, silent. When Aldrich returned above ground, his face was heavy, not with fear, but grief. "The stone does not recognize this," he said. Corvin's eyes darkened briefly. "Then the stone," he replied evenly, "may no longer be sufficient." Trust, offered too freely, Irian could not sleep. The words of the document lingered in his thoughts, not as threat, but as temptation. How much easier it would be, he thought, if someone else carried the weight, if knowledge could be neatly stored, decisions made cleanly. The prime mark pulsed faintly, not warning, asking. He rose quietly and walked the monastery halls, lantern in hand. That was when he heard voices. The truth between walls behind a sealed archive door. Corvin stood with two figures Irian recognized, junior members of the Order, recently arrived from distant regions. "The bearer is young," Corvin said softly, "unformed. He will trust structure." "And Aldrich?" one asked. "Too old," Corvin replied. "Memory becomes stubborn." Irian's breath caught. They spoke of shifting records, of redirecting relics, of sealing the temple of silent stone under authority rather than invitation. This was not a coup, it was worse. It was rational betrayal. The mark responds. Irian stepped back quietly, heart pounding. The prime mark burned, not hot, but bright. He understood then. Betrayal does not always arrive with blades. Sometimes it comes wrapped in logic and ink. He did not confront Corvin. He did something harder. He told Aldrich. The keeper's choice. Aldrich listened without interruption. When Irian finished, the old man nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said. "This is why the bearer must remain human." "What do we do?" Irian asked. Aldrich smiled sadly. "We allow the betrayal to complete itself without letting it succeed." The ink turned against itself at dawn. Corvin was invited to the Temple of Silent Stone. The document was placed once more before the pillar. Irian stood beside Aldrich. Malin watched silently. "Let the bearer affirm the amendment," Corvin said smoothly. "Let the covenant evolve." Irian stepped forward. He placed his hand not on the document, but on the stone. The prime mark flared. The ink on the parchment began to fade, not burn, not tear, simply lose meaning, letters softening, words unraveling into harmless symbols. Corvin staggered back. "What have you done?" he demanded. Irian's voice was steady. "I remembered." A gentle fall. Corvin did not fight. He bowed his head slowly. "I truly believed this was better," he said. Aldrich nodded. "That is what makes it betrayal." Corvin surrendered his seals and departed Eldermere alone. No chains, no guards, just consequence. The Order would judge him later, quietly. A night of healing that evening, Eldermere glowed brighter than usual, not in celebration but in relief. Irian sat by the hearth, hands wrapped around warm cider. Aldrich slept nearby, exhaustion finally claiming him. Malin sat across from Irian. "You chose well," she said. "I was afraid," Irian admitted. She smiled gently. "Good, fear keeps ink honest." A cozy ending, earned outside, the last of the snow melted into the earth. Spring took hold. The covenant held, not because it was defended, but because it was understood. And in Eldermere, beneath stone and star, the night settled into peace once more. The fire burned steady. The betrayal had passed, and the story wiser now continued. War at the gates of the Prime Realm. War did not arrive in Eldermere with banners or screams. It came the way winter storms sometimes did, first as a change in the air, a pressure behind the eyes, a sense that the world had leaned slightly out of balance and was waiting to see whether it would fall. Spring had taken hold of the valley. Grass returned in cautious green threads. Apple trees showed their first shy blossoms. The river ran free again, laughing softly over stones long hidden beneath ice. And yet the birds went quiet more often now. Brother Aldrich noticed it first, noticed the way the bells rang a breath too long. The way shadows lingered at dawn, the way the silent stone warmed even when no one touched it. "The gates are thinning," he said one evening, voice low. Irian felt the prime mark respond, steady, alert. "Gates?" he asked. Aldrich nodded. "Not doors, ideas. The Prime Realm." Solomon Prime had never been a place one could walk into. It was a state of balance, a harmony between what existed and what must remain restrained. But when imbalance grew strong enough, that harmony gathered shape. The Order called this convergence the Prime Realm. It appeared only at the edge of great forgetting or great remembering, and now it was forming again. The first breach it began at the eastern hills. Shepherds reported strange lights at dusk, soft, colorless glows that bent around stone and tree alike. No heat, no sound, just presence. Then came the dreams. People dreamed of walking familiar roads that subtly changed beneath their feet, of doors appearing where walls once stood, of voices that asked questions instead of giving commands. Most woke calm, a few woke afraid. Malin returned from a scouting ride with news that tightened the air in the monastery hall. "Something presses against the edges," she said. "Not an army, not a beast. An intention," Aldrich murmured. "Yes, not all wars are fought with blades the Order gathered. Not many, but enough." They stood in the temple of silent stone, cloaks unfastened, armor worn openly now not as threat but as acknowledgement. "This war," Malin said, "cannot be won by killing." "Good," Irian replied quietly. "I don't know how to do that." A faint smile passed among them. "You know how to stand," Aldrich said. "That will be enough." They decided to hold the line not at the hills, but at Eldermere itself. The town was not chosen because it was strong. It was chosen because it was kind. The gates appear. On the third night, the gates formed. They were not arches or portals. They were moments, thin places where the world paused and listened too hard. One appeared near the old mill, another at the forest edge. A third shimmered faintly beside the monastery walls, like heat above stone. From them came no soldiers, only figures shaped like memory, half-formed silhouettes stitched from regret, ambition, and forgotten oaths. They did not attack, they asked, "Why must we remain bound? Why must knowledge be hidden? Why must power sleep?" People felt the pull, not violent, but persuasive. This was the danger. Irian at the threshold, Irian stood at the monastery gate as the first figures approached. The prime mark glowed, not fiercely, but clearly. Malin stood beside him, sword sheathed. "No steel," she reminded. "I know," Irian said. The figure nearest him spoke, not aloud, but into the space behind his thoughts. "Release us." Irian breathed slowly. "You are not prisoners," he said gently. "You are unfinished questions." The figure hesitated. Around them, townsfolk gathered not in panic, but in quiet concern. Lanterns were raised. Fires burned. Warmth met shadow. The war of choice at each gate, the same scene unfolded. Order members did not fight. They listened. They answered not with force, but with truth spoken plainly. "We remember you," they said, "but we will not let you rule us." Some figures dissolved peacefully. Others lingered uncertain. At the mill gate, a shadow surged forward, feeding on fear. A child cried out. Irian moved, not fast, not slow. He stepped between. The prime mark pulsed once, steady as a heartbeat. "You cannot take what is freely tended," he said softly. The shadow unraveled like mist in sunlight. The cost, gently paid, not all moments passed without pain. One order member collapsed from exhaustion, drained by holding too many thresholds at once. A baker's hand shook for days after standing too long at the gate near her home. But no one died. No blade tasted blood. The war was fought in endurance, not destruction. By dawn, the gates faded. The prime realm receded, not defeated, but balanced. After the holding, Eldermere woke to birdsong and dew. The world looked unchanged. Yet everyone felt it, that something vast had brushed past and been turned aside by simple human warmth. Irian sat on the monastery steps, utterly spent. Aldrich joined him, lowering himself carefully. "You did well," the old keeper said. Irian shook his head. "We did." Aldrich smiled. "Yes." That is the point. The knight's gift that evening. The town gathered in the square, not to celebrate victory, but to rest together. Candles were lit. Music played softly. Children slept on benches wrapped in cloaks. Irian held a mug of warm cider, watching the flames dance. The prime mark dimmed, not gone, but peaceful. The war had passed, not because it was crushed, but because it was understood. A cozy ending, strong and true as night settled fully. The stars shone clear and calm. No gates shimmered. No shadows pressed close. It's only the steady warmth of a town that had chosen balance over fear. Solomon Prime rested, and the night, still not crowned, still not named, sat quietly by the fire, smiling as the world slept safely once more. The knight who defied prophecy. Prophecies rarely arrive like thunder. They settle instead, softly, like dust on old shelves, until one day someone disturbs them simply by living honestly. In Eldermere, life returned to its gentle rhythms after the holding of the gates. Fields were replanted. The mill wheel turned again. His laughter returned fully to the square, no longer carrying that careful edge people wore when they sensed the world might be listening too closely. Yet within the monastery walls, the air had changed. Not heavier, clearer. Brother Aldrich felt it each morning as he walked the halls, like a story reaching the moment where it must decide what it truly means. The scroll no one wanted to read the prophecy was not new. It had slept for centuries in the deepest archive of the order, wrapped in linen and humility, brought out only when the prime realm stirred too strongly to ignore. Malin carried it now. She placed the scroll upon the table in the temple of silent stone, hands steady, expression troubled. This was never meant to be opened, she said. And yet, Aldrich replied gently, it always was. Irian stood nearby, not touching the table, not touching the scroll. He already felt it. What the prophecy said it spoke plainly. That was the most dangerous thing about it. When balance trembles and memory stirs, a knight shall rise bearing the prime mark. He shall seal the realm with blade and fire, or the world shall fracture beneath mercy unguarded. There were variations, commentaries written by careful hands across generations, but the core remained unchanged. A knight, a sealing. As a final act, Malin's voice softened. Every previous bearer believed this meant sacrifice, war, and ending. Irian swallowed. And does it? He asked. Aldrich did not answer immediately. The weight of expectation word spread, not through rumor, but through quiet acknowledgement. Some members of the order began to treat Irian differently, with reverence, with distance, with unspoken relief. At last, their eyes seemed to say, the answer has arrived. Irian hated that look, not because he feared duty, but because it felt like surrender. Children still ran to him in the square. Bakers still handed him warm rolls. His parents still argued gently about trivial things. This ordinary love was what the prophecy did not mention. A walk beyond the walls one evening, Irian left Eldermere alone. No escort, no announcement. He walked into the western fields where grass bent softly beneath moonlight and the scent of damp earth lingered from recent rain. The world felt open here, unbounded, listening, patient. He sat on a low stone and pressed his palm to his chest. The prime mark warmed. Is this what you want? He whispered. For the first time, it did not answer with warmth alone. It answered with stillness. And in that stillness, Irian understood something vital. The prime mark did not command. It trusted. The prophecy challenged. The next morning, Irian returned to the Temple of Silent Stone. The order was assembled. Aldrich stood at the pillar. Malin waited, alert and worried. Irian did not bow. He spoke calmly. I will not seal the prime realm by force. A murmur rippled. Malin stiffened. Irian. I know what the prophecy says, he continued, but it speaks from fear, from a time when people believed control was the same as balance. An elder stepped forward. The prophecy has never failed. No, Irian said gently. People have failed into it. Silence followed. The stone responds. Irian turned to the silent stone. He placed both hands upon it. I choose another way, he said, not as defiance, but as offering. The stone warmed not suddenly, not violently, but fully deeply, like a hearth that had been waiting all night. Cracks appeared, not breaking the stone, but revealing lines that had always been there. Patterns, pathways. Aldrich gasped softly. The covenant is expanding, he murmured. A new interpretation. Irian turned back to the order. The prime realm doesn't need sealing, he said. It needs integration. The shadows at the gates weren't enemies. They were neglected truths. Malin's eyes widened. You would open the realm, someone demanded. No, Irian replied. I would walk it, slowly, carefully, with people. The prime mark pulsed, not brighter, but steadier than ever before. The defiance becomes choice. This was the moment prophecy demanded blood, and Irian refused to give it. Instead, he removed the sword Aldrich had once given him and laid it at the base of the pillar. I will carry it, he said, but I will not let it decide who I become. No lightning fell, no punishment came. The stone remained warm. The prophecy, ancient, rigid, afraid, began to loosen. Those who could not follow, not all accepted this. 3 members of the order departed that day, not in anger, but certainty. They believed the prophecy immutable. They would seek another path. Irian bowed to them as they left. I hope you find peace, he said honestly. They did not answer. Those who stayed most remained, not because they were convinced, but because they trusted him. Malin knelt, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Then teach us, she said. How to walk instead of seal. Aldrich smiled, tears bright in his eyes. This, he whispered, is Solomon Prime remembered correctly. A quiet night of decision that night. Eldermere slept deeply. Irian sat by the hearth with his parents, listening to familiar stories told 100 times before. His mother dozed against his shoulder. His father stared into the fire. Content. Nothing had ended. Everything had changed. Outside, the stars watched, not rearranging this time, but holding their places. The cozy truth prophecies had expected a night of endings. Instead, the world received a night of continuation. Not one who sealed doors, but one who taught people how to walk through them without losing themselves. The fire burned low. The night was gentle. And destiny, patient at last, stepped aside. Solomon Prime restored to light. Spring had settled fully over Eldermere. The snow that once clung stubbornly to the eastern hills had melted completely, feeding the rivers with clear, playful streams. Grass bent under the sun, daring to grow again, and the orchard trees had begun to blush faintly with tiny blossoms. Birds sang in the early morning, their songs carrying without pause or care, a reflection of the world now leaning slightly toward ease and warmth. Irian walked through the town slowly, taking it all in. Every step on the cobblestones felt like a note struck in a long-forgotten melody. Children ran by, laughing, snow still melting from their hair, oblivious to the unseen realms brushing near them. Bakers hung fresh loaves on shelves that now seemed to glow with the scent of home. Everything was ordinary, and yet it was extraordinary. The temple awaits. The temple of silent stone had become more than a place of quiet reflection. Its chambers now hummed softly, not with magic, but with presence. The prime mark pulsed faintly in Irian's chest as he approached the central pillar. Aldrich, Malin, and the remaining Order members were already there. "Are you ready?" Aldrich asked, voice low but steady. Irian knelt before the pillar. He did not feel fear nor expectation, only calm, only warmth. "I am ready," he whispered. Aldrich nodded. Malin placed her hand briefly on his shoulder, a simple gesture of trust and shared purpose. Even the walls seemed to lean closer, anticipating without pressing. The realm unfolds. Irian closed his eyes. The prime mark glowed, soft and steady, as he let himself listen. At first, there was nothing. Then, the edges of awareness began to ripple. In colors unseen by the human eye shimmered behind his eyelids. Sounds not heard before, the subtle pulse of stone, the sigh of wind in places untouched, spoke to him in rhythm with the prime mark. The gates of the prime realm had appeared before, but this time they were different. They did not demand sealing. They did not whisper danger. They waited, patient, curious, unafraid, and Irian understood finally. This was what Solomon Prime had always intended, not confinement, but careful tending, not power, but stewardship. The gathering of shadows figures appeared along the edges of the temple. Not enemies, not threats, but memories and questions given form. Shadows of all the possibilities left unwalked, all the maybes humanity had left behind. They paused at the threshold of the chamber, observing. "Who comes?" Irian asked softly. The shadows shifted, almost imperceptibly. Their movements spoke in gentle, questioning gestures, not force. They wanted something: recognition, perhaps, or permission. "You are not bound here," Irian said. His voice carried the calm assurance of years of choice and trials. "You may remain, or you may walk into light." Then slowly, carefully, they began to move. Not away, not into chaos, but into a harmonious rhythm with the temple itself. Integration, not conquest, the prime mark responded. Warmth spread outward from Irian's chest, filling the temple with a soft golden glow. It touched each shadow, each stone, each fragment of memory waiting in silence. This was the final trial, but unlike the others, it asked not for courage or endurance. It asked for care. Irian's hands hovered above the pillar, fingertips brushing the surface lightly. He guided the flow gently, not forcing, not directing. The prime realm expanded around him, weaving together all the scattered fragments of truth, fear, hope, and forgotten knowledge into a single luminous whole. For the first time, Solomon Prime was complete, restored, not as a place of isolation or command, but as a living network of understanding and light. The night's true gift, Irian stepped back, breathing slowly. Around him, the Order members watched in awe. Aldrich's eyes glistened, and Malin's hands were pressed together in quiet reverence. "You did it," Malin said, voice breaking only slightly. "You've restored it." Irian shook his head, smiling faintly. "No," he said, "I didn't. We did it. The Prime Mark guided me, yes, but Solomon Prime was waiting. It only needed someone to remember it kindly." The truth settled like soft snow. Heroism was not about force or fame, but attentive, patient care. Returned to Eldermere as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the temple windows, Irian returned to the town. The streets glimmered with morning dew, and life carried on in its usual rhythms, but something was different. No one could quite name it. Perhaps it was the subtle alignment of all things, the sense that the world had been touched by understanding. Children played with unhurried laughter. Bakers moved with extra care, scenting the air with warmth. Even the river hummed in time with the unseen balance that now stretched across valleys and hills. Irian walked through the town square and allowed himself a rare moment to simply watch. The Prime Mark pulsed faintly, hidden beneath his tunic but content. A hearth, a home, and a peaceful night that evening, he returned to the monastery. Fires burned in hearths, welcoming and familiar. Aldrich and Malin sat together quietly, sharing a loaf of bread. Outside, the stars shone, clear and calm, mirrored by the gentle flicker of lanterns below. Irian sat with them, his hands wrapped around a warm mug, listening to the night. No battles raged. No shadows demanded attention. Just warmth and the subtle sense that the world was as it should be. The Prime Mark dimmed, not absent, but resting. A companion rather than a guide. The story settles, gently. Irian stepped outside briefly, looking up at the night sky. Every star seemed to shine a little differently now, not brighter, not dimmer, but attentive. As if watching, quietly approving, he returned inside. He knelt by the hearth. The fire cracked softly, sending long shadows along the walls. He smiled. Solomon Prime was not a place of endings. It was a home. The night was no longer a legend to fear or a prophecy to fulfill. He was a steward, a witness, a bearer of calm strength. Outside, the town slept. The temple rested. The stars remained. And Irian, the night of Solomon Prime, finally rested too.
There's nothing else you need to listen for now. Just let your breathing stay slow and easy. If you're still awake, that's okay. And if you're drifting off, let yourself go gently. I'll be right here next time. Rest well, and good night.